Hello and welcome to another episode of the 05 Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Abernathy. It's been a couple of weeks since we last did an episode. Our last episode was with my executive pastor, Chris Chalman. And with it being May, the kids getting out of school, all of the awards and all the end of school activities, life just happens. And so trying to be the good dad and the good husband. I didn't get to record a podcast because I was going to all my kids' activities, and I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. That's just how I am. I love church safety and security in this ministry, but I love my kids more and my wife more. So that being said, in today's episode, what I'd like to do is I'd like to combine a few of my most recent Substack articles that I've written in talking about initial steps for developing a safety ministry at your church. So whether you're starting from scratch and you're that motivated individual that's trying to get this going at your church, or maybe you're at a church that has a team, it's loosely formed, but there's really not much organization. This is going to be for you. And the main thing that we want to realize or remember is that we want to form a safety ministry. We don't want to just form a team. And here's the difference. A ministry has kingdom impact. That's the goal of a ministry, is kingdom impact. The goal of a team is security. They're going to guard the church, and that's about it. And if you're that motivated individual trying to get your team started or get your ministry started, or you want to turn your team into a ministry and you're having trouble getting backing from your church leaders, it's probably your approach. I just recently went to a USCCA seminar on protecting houses of worship, just to kind of see what they had. And one of the biggest complaints by the people in the room was, this is all well and good, but how do I get my church leaders to bite off on this? I was there, so I piped up and I told them, I was like, if you want to get church leadership backing, church leaders don't speak security, right? That's a language that if you're listening to this podcast, you and I both understand. Security has a certain language to it. It's not if, it's when, things like that. Pastors and church leaders don't speak that language. They speak the language of ministry. When you talk security to a pastor or a church leader, what they hear is a means of keeping people out of the church. That's the exact opposite of what they want. So when you're talking to your church leaders about building a safety ministry, you need to talk to them from the standpoint of the kingdom and ministry impact that a safety ministry can have. It's not security. Security is a byproduct. What it's about is it is people walking into your church, seeing a group of prepared, trained, and situationally aware individuals and realizing, I'm safe here. I can let my guard down. And when they let their guard down, their minds and their hearts are more open to hearing what the Holy Spirit has to tell them through the pastor or through the worship leader or through the youth pastor or this children's minister. That's the kingdom value that a safety ministry can bring. That's just one side of it. The other side of it is another avenue to get people involved in your church, especially guys, but also just people that don't fit in your other typical ministries. I've talked about this ad nauseum in my podcast and in my different Substack articles. Is the safety ministry is kind of a catch-all for the folks that want to serve, they have a desire to serve, just don't have a place to. I tell people all the time, I can't teach, preach, sing, I can't play an instrument, and I don't have enough patience to deal with kids other than my own. So what is there for me in the church? In most churches, there's nothing. And that's something that I've discovered my whole life, is there's really never been a place for me to serve at the church. I'm not really personable enough to be a greeter. And so when our church started a safety ministry, that became the place for me. And I've got 30 other people on my team that are exactly like me. And so your church safety ministry can have that same impact. It's taking your wallflower Baptists, your back row folks, and putting them front and center, serving their church. And it's the community that is built around them. That is the kingdom impact. There's mentorship, there's discipleship, there's all these positives that come from the community and the ministry of safety. So that's how you need to approach your church leadership or your pastors. If you've decided, or your church leaders have decided, okay, we're going to move forward with this, we're going to do this, the first and foremost thing is, of course, pray about it. In my Bible readings today, I came across Psalm 127, and I'm going to read this. Unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the watchman stays awake in vain. If you're going to build anything, God needs to be front and center in what you're building. So that needs to happen first. Then, as God leads you, you need to start making some key decisions. Decisions like, what type of role do we want this ministry to have? Do we want an all-encompassing, all-response ministry that responds to everything? Do we want to have a mostly medically based or kind of usher group and then hire off-duty police? Do we want to do just security? Do we want to do security only and leave medical to 911 or any medical professionals we have in the church? That's a decision that your church leadership has to make prayerfully. In my experience, I highly, highly recommend having an all hazards, all response ministry. The reason being, it is an unfortunate truth that in today's society, our enemies see churches as soft, vulnerable targets. On top of that, the public service agencies that we have put our trust in for decades upon decades, they're not what they used to be. And I'm telling you this as a firefighter, still active, it's just different. In the almost 14 years that I've been doing this, the fire department is not what it used to be 14 years ago when I first got into it. The police department in the city that I work in is nowhere near what it used to be. They're underfunded, they're understaffed, and they're undertrained because of COVID and because of politics and all these other things. Municipalities are having a hard time putting butts in the seats of police cars and fire trucks and ambulances. And so they've reduced their training. They've reduced their requirements, and you're getting less than qualified people in these jobs. And I can tell you from firsthand experience, I've run shootings where I'm not bagging on police, but these officers didn't know what they were doing. In a normal situation, the police officers are supposed to clear the scene and then call in fire and EMS. These officers called it ahead of time and said, yeah, it's clear, go on in. We had a gunshot wound victim, five gunshot wounds to his chest. We're working on him, and we're there for 15 minutes, and then we see SWAT stack up on a door 20 feet away from us. And we're like, hey, what's going on? And the SWAT guy's like, yeah, we think he's in here. We're about to kick the door down. Well, we're 20 feet away from the guy that whoever's in that room just shot. That's not a good feeling. And the unfortunate thing is that was due to the training. That was due to the training and the lack of experience. So that's what we're seeing in today's first responders is the agencies just aren't there anymore. The response times aren't there anymore. And so as a church, you have to become your own first responders. Your safety, your well-being is now up to you. Heaven forbid an active attack happens at your church. It's going to take a while before anybody gets there. For every minute that the active attack is going on and nobody's addressing that active attack, the number of potential casualties goes up exponentially. Read Ed Monk's The First 30 Seconds, and he breaks down the math. And that's what he talks about. It's all about the math. And so you need to be your own protectors. That's why I highly recommend having an all hazards safety ministry. Once you've kind of determined the parameters that you're going to have your safety ministry, uh, one of the next steps is to pick a leader. And this is one of the most important decisions you're going to make, is who is going to lead your safety team, because the future success or failure of your team is gonna rest a lot on that person's shoulders. In one of my most recent Substacks, the 05 Safety Training Substack, I talk about what to look for in a leader. And it might surprise you that first responder experience and military experience are not automatic qualifiers. They should not be automatic qualifiers. And the reason being is not all first responders and not all veterans have true firearms, emergency response, or security experience. There are lots of jobs in the military. There's cooks, there's flight mechanics, there's paper pushers, there's storekeepers, there's all these jobs that, yes, they're a veteran, but no, they have no combat arms experience. They have no actual firearms under stress experience. If they deployed, they were likely in an air-conditioned tent the entirety of their deployment. And so don't use veteran status as an automatic qualifier. The same thing for your first responders. You may have somebody that raises their hand and says, I'm a 30 plus year retired Leo, 10 years on the SWAT team and super medic of the year. And when you if you dig into it, they were the SWAT commander of Mayberry, and they were one of two police officers in that entire town, and nothing ever happened. That I wouldn't constitute that as significant emergency response experience. That's just how it is. Not saying that they're bad people, not saying any of those people are bad people. In fact, they probably do have the heart of a protector in them, but they may not have the experience that you think they do when they say first responder or veteran. So don't use that as an automatic qualifier. On the flip side of that coin, you may have that former SEAL Team 6 guy. You may have that former SWAT commander that says, yep, I'll do it. And from the security and firearms and response side, they've got all the qualifications, but they don't have the heart for ministry. That is just as important as experience is ministry. In fact, I would say the heart for ministry is more important than the experience, because I know lots of safety ministry leads that have zero experience, but they're fantastic at what they do because of their heart for ministry. They are running a ministry, not a security team. 2 Substack articles ago, I talk about a friend of mine that is the security director for a church. She has zero first responder, medical, or military experience, none. But man, has she got a heart for ministry. And man, does she have a protector's heart. And so she runs a tight ship. She runs a fantastic ministry. And because she knows she doesn't have experience, she doesn't use that as a crutch. She uses it as a motivator to push herself and her team to get better. That is exactly what you want in a safety ministry leader. Is one, somebody that's always trying to be better themselves and their ministry. 2, they know and they realize they have gaps. And so they're doing everything they can to shore those gaps, whether it's personally in their experience or their knowledge, or it's gaps in their team, gaps in their coverage, gaps in their protocols. You want somebody that's always pushing forward. Being complacency kills. In emergency response in this type of world, complacency kills. You never want anybody that's complacent. So those are things that you want to look for in deciding for your leader. Pray about it. Interview people. Find out where their heart is at and choose based off of their heart, not necessarily their experience. Experience helps, but it's not the linchpin. It's not the key. Once you have kind of built the parameters of what your safety ministry is going to be, you've chosen a leader, Now you need to work with your leader to start developing your security posture, your standard operating procedures, and your standard operating guidelines or emergency response guidelines. To do this, I highly, highly recommend getting an outside source to come in and do a threat and vulnerability assessment on your campus. Before you go determining your security posture, you need to know where you're weak. It's very, very easy, and I know a lot of churches that do this. They bring somebody from within their church. They bring a Leo or somebody that does risk assessment for their church, and they bring them in because it's cheap, or they'll do it for free. You're going to get what you pay for, and you're going to get a certain level of cognitive bias by somebody that goes to church there. If I'm doing a threat assessment on a facility and my kids attend that facility, where do you think most of my stress of vulnerabilities is going to be focused on? It's going to be on the kids areas where my kids are at. And so you're not going to get a completely unbiased viewpoint on your security vulnerabilities. You could get that person to do an initial threat assessment, but bring somebody from the outside to do a threat assessment that's unbiased. A couple of things that they need to keep in consideration, or questions that they need to be asking, are: what kind of population do you have? Do you have mostly elderly? Do you have a lot of kids? Do you have everything in between? How big is your church? They need to be talking to local PD about what kind of violent incidents have happened in that area. What's the crime rate in that area? Those are things that need to be considered. In fact, you could probably go to your local PD and ask for somebody to come out and do a threat assessment, and they'll likely do it. A lot of PDs will do that for you. And so that's a resource that you could tap into. Plus, on a side note, it is never a bad idea to build relationships with your local PD. Give them donuts. Put donuts and coffee outside and invite your police officers over, and it's never a bad thing. In fact, one thing that we've done in my church, we've developed a relationship with our SWAT team, and they have actually come in and trained and flowed through our building. And so, and they, as part of that, it was a win-win situation. They got to flow through our building, which our building could be very complicated. We got to ask them questions. And also, because we have security cameras, we got to watch their flow, and we got to kind of learn on how they flow through our building. So now we can learn CQB similar to how they're doing it. That just some added benefit with that. But I highly recommend build a relationship with your local LE. One of the first things you could do is reach out to them for your threat assessment. Other things that need to be addressed in your threat assessment are actual facility weak points, facility upgrades that need to be made to up your level of security. I'm going to address that. I've addressed that in a Substack post. We'll talk about that later. But once you have that threat assessment, once you know your weak points, once you know your procedural weak points within your church, that's something else your threat assessor should look at. They should look at your church empty, and they should look at it on a normal Sunday. And they should understand your procedures to protect your kids or your vulnerable populations. But they should also know what your facilities look like empty and where the weak points are. Once you've had all that, it's time to develop your SOP. I've written ad nauseum, and I've talked about a whole lot what SOPs are. I highly recommend going on my Substack. I've got an article specifically teaching you how to write your SOP. It gives you item by item on what you need to consider for your SOP and how to write it. But also, if you, which I hope you do, if you become a paying subscriber to our Substack, I actually have templates that you can copy, paste, and basically it's written for you. You just got to add your little nuances for your church to it. So just a shameless plug there to become a paying subscriber to the 05 Safety Podcast. That supports us a whole lot. Also writing your emergency response guidelines or your SOGs. That's something else I've written about quite a bit. I'm not going to go into that a whole lot of detail here. That may be another episode because that could be a whole episode by itself in how to write those things. Side note, make sure you understand your state and local laws that govern your ability to have a safety ministry. Depending on what state you're in, determines what you're allowed to do in terms of armed security, whether or not they have to have their private security licenses or they could just be volunteer. Every state's a little bit different. In Texas, we have a lot of protection to have a volunteer armed security, but there are some caveats, and there are some caveats in which we have to document in order for that to happen. That'll be another episode where I'll talk specifically to the Texas folks. So we've determined we want a safety ministry. We've prayed about it. We've determined parameters. We've chosen a leader. We've gotten a threat assessment and built our security posture, our SOP, and our SOGs. Now it's time to recruit your people. That's going to be another episode. And so that's where we're at. Those are our first baby steps towards building our safety ministry. Building an organized safety ministry is so important, because when people see that you're organized and people see that you have processes in place and you have a selection process and you have documentation, you have all these things, recruitment's going to come a lot easier for you. I promise you that. And so get all of these baby steps knocked out first before you start announcing, hey, we're going to have this ministry, and before you start pulling people in. Because if you have the building blocks, you have the foundation in place, the people will come and you will get the right people. I promise you that. And so those are those building blocks. That's the foundation. Thanks for joining me. And I want to give one little plug. 05 Safety Training has started a fundraising event through Give, Send, Go, with the goal of raising funds to buy force-on-force equipment and safety gear to make force-on-force training available and affordable for church safety ministries. You can ask any special operations guy. I can tell you firsthand that force-on-force training, especially when it's coupled with scenarios, it's some of the best training you can get, because you really don't know how you're going to react in a highly stressful situation until you've been there. Force on force using simunitions or UTMs or Unit 9s, when you're getting shot at, it's going to reveal how you react under stress, because those things hurt and you don't want to hurt. It's some of the best training you're going to get. It reveals your weak spots, both procedurally but individually. And so the problem with that type of training is it's top tier training. It's very, very expensive, and it's very hard to come by, just because there's a lot of hoops to being able to give that type of training. We have already jumped through most of the hoops in terms of becoming instructors and getting the insurance. We just need the money to buy the equipment. It's expensive, and it's well out of our budget. And so if you have a church safety ministry, or you believe in what we're doing, please consider donating to our Give, Send, Go fundraiser. We're an LLC. We're not a nonprofit, so none of these donations are tax deductible. But if you believe in what we're doing, if you want top tier training to be available and affordable for churches to learn how to protect themselves and how to protect their families, please give. Also, you can support us by subscribing to our Substack and becoming a paid subscriber. That by itself supports us a tremendous amount. That is what enables this to happen. And so those of you that have supported us already, I can't thank you enough. Thank you. And this is my mission. This is my ministry. All of us with 05, the three instructors and I, we love doing this. We love helping churches build these ministries. We love teaching people how to protect themselves, because for us, that's what it's about. It's about protecting His people and giving Him the glory. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.